Julie MacRae's educational career has spanned 4 decades and 4 Canadian provinces. Currently serving as the Director of Education CEO of Regina Public Schools, Julie has been a practicing superintendent since 1998. Prior to moving to the Prairies last year, Julie had the opportunity to develop her own leadership skills working with educators in school districts 87, 57, 71, 72, and 34 here in British Columbia. She has also served as president of the BC SSA and spent 2 years working as superintendent liaison with the Ministry of Education. Please welcome Julie.
I was a little bit worried when I put all that stuff in my bio that what I would really be communicating to you all was my inability to hold permanent employment, but it's not the case. I'm very grateful for the opportunity I've been given and quite honored by the invitation to be here today. And I was also grateful, I guess, for the opportunity to take a look at the current leadership standards in use in British Columbia schools by school-based leaders. I'm not sure that what I'm about to say is going to specifically relate to those standards, but I have tried, as I've put some of my own thoughts together around this, to connect what I think the implications are for the leadership standards. And the topic that I chose for today was to talk about what I believe is essentially the role of all of us who exercise leadership in public schools. And that is the task that we have of balancing the possibilities for our students, the practicalities of the resources that we have to work with, and the paradoxes that are inherent in the kinds of roles that we assume when we take on the role of leadership in a school system. And I think some of those paradoxes, I'll begin with those, I think they have their roots very much just in what I call the dilemma that is public schooling. Essentially, in public schools, we are tasked by our society and by our government with developing individual personal potential in what is by definition a collective enterprise. We are also tasked with creating futures, certainly at this point, we're tasked with creating futures that we can't quite imagine for our students because we don't know. Things are changing so quickly, we can't possibly envision what lies ahead for the students who are entering our system at this point in time. So we're tasked with creating futures we can't quite imagine in physical and organizational structures that we don't yet quite have a permission or the ability or the resources to abandon. And we are also, in the information age, trying to be innovative and transformative in our schools while still being held responsible for things like transmission of history and culture and for a schooling model that is recognizable and acceptable to our public. So the implication of that, I suppose, in terms of school leadership standards is that we need to keep in mind that we cannot get too far ahead of our public and that we are first and foremost public servants and that the primary currency and the necessary prerequisite for our business is not just information and knowledge, but also engaging and holding the public trust. Leadership itself, particularly at the school level, is also inherently paradoxical. All of us who've done any reading about leadership theory know that leadership has, in a school system at least, a singular focus, which is to be the achievement and success of our students. But it also is a synergistic process. It doesn't just depend on us and the kind of leadership we provide. It is both an individual and a shared activity. It requires us, paradoxically, to manage while we're leading. And in the final analysis, it is as much about who we are as human beings as what we do. And I guess in terms of the leadership standards that we are here to begin a review of, I think there's encouragement in that as currently written, the leadership standards acknowledge these paradoxes and to a great degree make them explicit. Other paradoxical expectations that we place on our school leaders. We want them to lead and to follow simultaneously. We want them to maintain while they are creating and innovating. We want them to hold membership in multiple teams at once, the team that they lead, teams that they belong to by way of professional associations or learning networks, and teams that are set up as districts or divisions in order to meet the political and educational mandates of communities and governments. We want leaders to have faith in our systems, but we also want them to ask questions. We want them to follow the rules, the policies, and to do it this way, in that manner, but we also encourage them to take risks. And above all, we exhort them to give it their all, but also, please take care of yourself and have a balanced life. I think Fullen, in one of his books, calls this whole notion simplexity. And quite frankly, I sometimes see it as a validation that schizophrenia should be a job requirement for all of us. There are other things that affect our ability to be good leaders, and these I call practicalities. These are the things we don't plan for. It's when the urgent overtakes the important. And some days it is just a fact of life that we don't get to lead at all in the way that we would like to. These could be events like job action. These could be events like a tragedy such as the one that befell a student and, well, a school community, but also a whole nation and beyond last week. In terms of a student suicide, it can be a catastrophe of another kind. And I think while these kinds of incidents can be viewed as interruptions and distractors, they are also opportunities in that they can also provide us with an opportunity to lead. What we need, I think, inside our systems is the permission to recognize these events for what they are and to acknowledge them. And then we have to always fundamentally remember to operate, even during those times, with our long game in mind. So we need to believe in and communicate both our personal and our organizational capacity to recover, to regain our focus, to regain our momentum. We need to behave in ways that honor our relationships, that align with our personal values, and continuously keep in our own minds, even in the midst of a crisis, our view of who we are when we are our best self. I want to talk, lastly, about technology and leadership. Done a lot of thinking and have had spent quite a time of late looking at the possibilities that the internet, that social networks, that new advancements in technology provide educators, provide students, provide the grown-ups who work with our students in our schools. And while I am excited by the possibilities, I'm no Chris Kennedy, but I use my tools, not as well as Chris Kennedy does. But I have some caveats too, I think, for those of us who are charged with leadership in school systems around the access to that technology and the opportunities that it provides. And they are as follows. Connectivity does not equal connectedness. Learning is and always has been a social activity. There will always be a place for a physical presence in our work and for gathering face to face to do our learning. I also think we need to be cautious as a system that technology is not neutral. We've come out of a phase when we were regarding technology primarily as a tool, which implies that it is neutral. But I think we need to be careful as we move forward to remind ourselves that the creators, purveyors, and distributors of technology have the capacity not just to shape or to support and enhance our environment, but also to shape it, and if we're not careful, to overtake it entirely. I think too about social networks, which have an incredible power to widen our influence as leaders and thinkers, but there is also the possibility that our influence can be diluted. The web and its social networks are crowded. It's a crowded intellectual space. Good ideas abound. Deep thinking does not necessarily abound. Technology and the social networks have the capacity to be a weapon as well as a tool. And again, we've seen several good examples of that in recent weeks. Bullying by students is the topic of the hour, but they are not the only culprits. Adults, corporations, and even some of our tech companies are doing their share of bullying as well. And so the implication in terms of the leadership standards and the development or review of them is that I believe what we have to acknowledge with respect to these points that I've made is the need to increase need for critical thinking and to continue to focus on reflective professional practice. Just because we can do something does not mean that we should. What hasn't changed? What hasn't changed is that leadership requires more than being well-informed and well-connected. It still requires an action orientation and the capacity to influence other people to do the right things in the right way for the right reasons. What also won't change is the fact that the mirror test is still the best leadership assessment tool that each and every one of us will have. Can you look yourself in the mirror at night? Did what I do today contribute to better relationships? Did it improve life for students? Did I have a positive impact? And then, of course, the ultimate thing that will never change is that all of our students are worth our very best leadership efforts. Thank you.